Whoa, I forgot to do everything. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of DFO DFS Report. I got scrambled up there because I went to go live, and normally it just automatically gets tweeted out, but because X is just the worst website on the planet today, it didn't get sent out. So then it was giving me a warning that it wasn't happening, and I was panicking, and then I forgot to do everything, and now here we are. Welcome to another edition of DFO DFS Report. There's going to be like nobody watching today because it's not out on X. So I'm trying to tweet that out right now. If you guys could just bear with me here, DFO DFS Report is live. Good enough. Here we go. That should do. Okay, welcome into another edition of the DFO DFS Report. We haven't been here since last Wednesday because of the trade deadline, so I hope everyone was able to manage over the last few days. Had some big nights. Even I don't play that much DFS on the weekends without the chart, so hopefully you guys do okay over the weekends. It's always good. I always feel a little bit more prepared with the chart, so welcome in. Should be a fun slate tonight, realistically. 4-gamer, but really interesting 4-game slate. You got some big games like Ottawa Detroit might be the biggest game for the Red Wings of the season. So as a Red Wings fan, I know I'm excited for that one. But also some really high implied totals tonight. Obviously, you got Edmonton and Buffalo should be a high scoring game. You've got the Avalanche hosting the Blackhawks should be a high scoring game. So let's get right in. NFL free agency crash. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Twitter crashed on NHL free agency day last year as well. If I recall correctly, at least briefly. So same thing happened today. Kind of bizarre timing there. But welcome in. Here we go. Let's start with the goalies. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen likely to get the start for the Buffalo Sabres. It's going to be Stuart Skinner for the Edmonton Oilers. The Ottawa Senators will go with Linus Ullmark. Likely to see Cam Talbot for the Red Wings. Scott Wedgwood gets an nod for the Colorado Avalanche. Likely going to see Spencer Knight for the Chicago Blackhawks. He's just been absolutely spectacular for the Blackhawks since being acquired from Florida. And then it'll be Karel Vejmelka for the Utah Hockey Club, and it'll be Joseph Woll for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Zach, I was a little flustered there. I didn't even check in with you. How you doing, buddy? Welcome in for another edition.
Hey, Brock, I'm doing good, thank you. Thankfully, I think any of the internet issues we were having before the show, thankfully held off. So only one little glitch so far to start the day, but I think that's okay. Pretty fun slate tonight, man. I'm pretty excited about this one.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't jinx our internet. We've been known to have issues. I did it myself. I was sitting here thinking, man, we haven't had issues in a while. And then right before we went live, my internet crapped out on me. So we're a few minutes late, but we pick up the pieces. We ride. Anyway, let's go. We'll start with Buffalo and Edmonton. I'm sure Zach will have plenty to say about the Edmonton Oilers, who have the second highest implied total on the slate, 3.7. They seem, Zach, if you know, I'm not watching them every single night. I watch them most nights. Seem like they're out of their little funk.
It kind of feels like the Edmonton Oilers got their swagger back. I don't know if necessarily, what it was. Maybe it was like the trade deadline kind of coming and going. There's been a lot of talk about some of the veteran guys maybe being asked to waive no move clauses and stuff like that leading up to the deadline. But man, Saturday against the Dallas Stars, save for a near third period collapse, it was a pretty darn good game from the Edmonton Oilers. I think it was like 4-1 at some point in that game, 5-1 in that game. So I'm feeling pretty good about where they're at right now. Obviously, it's a pretty nice matchup here going up against a Buffalo Sabres team that's really kind of reeling right now, kind of in the opposite direction of where the Oilers are heading at this moment.
Javier says, let's go. Weekends suck so much. Yes. It's like the only time you'd ever hear that realistically. Yeah, I love Mondays. Weekends are terrible. Hank wonders, what are our thoughts on Mackie Samoskevich? I'm assuming that's based on a season-long question because they don't play tonight. But yeah, Samoskevich is the dog. If you listen to the DFO Fantasy Podcast, I talked about him at length on Friday after the trade deadline. And I actually picked him up in one of my leagues myself today. Okay, Zach, let's stop wasting time here. Let's get into tonight's slate. We've got the second highest pace score in this game. Not great matchups on the Buffalo Sabres side of things. Pretty good matchups across the board for the Edmonton Oilers, specifically that top line of Connor McDavid. They're going to see a lot of the Tage Thompson line, which is a new look line for the Buffalo Sabres. You're going to see Josh Norris move up to that top line with JJ Peterka and Tage Thompson. I imagine their defensive metrics will look a little bit better than they did with Yuri Kulich, but probably not like amazing. But when you take a look here, I mean, yeah, they are better, but still pretty bad. So really, really good matchup here for the Connor McDavid line, which is projected for 33% of the ice time tonight. They've been playing like crazy. This bottom six just doesn't play hockey, really. The second line, we've been talking about them a lot over the last month and a half or so. Their underlying metrics continue to be very, very strong. play a little bit less. Their matchup's a little bit worse, but still pretty good. So I think it's pretty safe to say that the entire top six of the Oilers is in play tonight. They have the, not a great power play advantage tonight. Their power play has been mediocre, going up against a pretty mediocre Sabres PK as well. The issue is the Oilers just haven't been drawing any penalties or any power plays whatsoever. So it's really hard to capitalize when you don't get any opportunities. So, very low penalty filled games for the Oilers so far this season. So Zach, like obviously the Oilers top six here in a really good spot. Second line grades out second best, first line grades out second best, and the second line grades out fifth best. Obviously, as is customary, the Connor McDavid line very expensive, 20,800. All things considered, that's fairly cheap for the Connor McDavid line, at least compared to years past. 5,200 for Nuge, 6,300 for Hyman makes them very affordable. But those kind of days where we said, let's take advantage of Connor McDavid at $8,500, they quickly went away with this not new pricing that exists. The second line's much cheaper, 15,200, but I mean, really haven't seen the same level of play, at least out of Vasily Podkolzin as of late. He's still $2,600, so he seems like a fine dart throw. It's just like he was actually getting shots on net for a period of time then. That doesn't seem to be the case so much anymore. Arvidsson, maybe he's the guy that was most thrilled to see the trade deadline come and go because he was doing nothing leading up to the deadline. And then after the deadline, he had at least one goal in that game and had 5 shots on goal against the Stars. So maybe he's kind of revitalized after the deadline.
Yeah, absolutely. A huge goal too. It was a beautiful one. Evan Bouchard set him up with a nice little cross ice pass and just wired a one-timer home. Haven't really seen a lot of that from Victor Arvidsson this year. Obviously he's not quite been what the Edmonton Oilers were hoping for. Really struggling to find some consistency. And I think he's definitely one of those guys that I talked about earlier. That's probably feeling a little bit lighter, and a little bit better about where he's at. Really promising to see him score that goal, take those 5 shots. Obviously, going to have to see if he can parlay that into some more consistent offense from him. But if all of a sudden he starts chugging along here with some good shot volume again and some offense, becomes very, very viable to be playing with Leon Draisaitl. I know there's some time in the last couple of weeks where, my Edmonton 2 exposure was basically just Draisaitl and Podkolzin, using Podkolzin as just a salary saver, $2,600. His game really hasn't been on here the last little while. As you mentioned, those first couple of months of the season, he really came out of the gates hot. He was shooting the puck a lot. He was blocking some shots here and there, contributing offensively, but just completely has fallen to the wayside. Similarly, I guess, to what happened with him in the Vancouver Canucks over the last couple of years as well. So I still think he's a fine play at $2,600. When you're building around McDavid and Draisaitl stacks, like for the power play exposure, you kind of have to find a cheap, low 2K guy to mix in there just to be able to afford the salary. And at $2,600, I think he's a fine dart throw. Really not expecting a whole lot from him. Edmonton 1, I mean, this is the one that's really exciting for me. I mean, Zach Hyman 2-goal performance on Saturday against the Dallas Stars. Connor McDavid, absolutely turnstiling Ilya Lyubushkin for that 1 goal. Helped set up Hyman with another great play in the offensive zone. So I'm feeling really good about where this Oilers team is at right now. They're projected to see a good chunk of ownership here on this slate, 9% for Edmonton 1, 11% for Edmonton 2. Count me in on being overexposed to the Edmonton Oilers here and what I think is a really good matchup. Again, just talking about the Buffalo Sabres here, like they've been really struggling defensively as of late. Obviously, the power play doesn't necessarily jump out of the board here. But in the same breath, the Oilers have been on a little bit of a shooting heater on the power play, and the Sabres cannot seem to get a save shorthanded here. So, if the Oilers do end up with a couple of opportunities tonight, I think I like their opportunity, or their chance to score, I should say, a little bit more than what the charts say.
Yeah, it's all going to come down to just getting those opportunities because we'll pull up the team trend chart here over the last 10 games. 73.1 save percentage at on the penalty kill for the Sabres as of late. So not ideal going up against the Edmonton Oilers, who are shooting 38.5% over their last 10 games on the power play. You take a look here, the Sabres really playing pretty poorly defensively. Not a huge surprise. The Oilers have cleaned it up. Like they've been solid. They just couldn't get a save there for a little bit. So it really comes down to whether or not Stuart Skinner shows up tonight is largely dependent on how good the Sabres are as a play. Because I think they're a fairly middling play overall, but if Stuart Skinner has an off night, then obviously things are going to stand out a little bit more for the Sabres. The matchups are far from ideal. I just I don't know how much Buffalo I'm going to get to. The public feels really good about Buffalo 1. They're the fourth highest owned line on the slate. Having more exposure to Buffalo 1 than Edmonton 1 tonight doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I think obviously it has to do with Josh Norris just being $4,900 and JJ Peterka just being $5,500, and they're obviously a little bit easier to fit with Colorado 1, which everybody's playing because their matchup is insane. But like, I feel like Edmonton is in almost as good of a spot as Colorado in this one. Obviously a road game. Obviously, the matchups may be a little bit more difficult, but the ownership being, near over double on Edmonton 2 and then over double on Edmonton 1. Like, I think that's a little crazy. So I'm definitely going to try to get some leverage on Edmonton tonight. Because yeah, they feel like they're in a really good spot. And I think that maybe Colorado's a little higher owned than I would like, I guess is what I'm trying to get. Like, I still think you can easily get to Colorado's ownership. So maybe it's not Colorado. Maybe it's these other lines that are probably a little bit too high owned. Maybe it's a little bit of Toronto. Maybe it's a little bit of Buffalo that feels a little bit too high. And I'm going to be lower exposed to them and a little bit higher on Edmonton 1. Let's go back to Buffalo. Like I said, the price is really affordable here. Peterka, Norris, and Thompson, 17,100 is a pretty good price tag there. I'm certainly going to be getting to them, probably similar to the field here, around 10%. I don't love the matchup overall, but again, Skinner, like I said, struggles, opens the door a little bit. Really hard to get a good read on how this line is going to perform. What I did was just took the underlying metrics for all three of these guys and averaged them out just to get an idea of what it could look like with Josh Norris on this line. Certainly not perfect science, but basically slightly above average offensively. They'll play 30% of the Sabres ice time. But the problem is they're going to go up against that McDavid line most of the night, which is very, very good defensively. Kind of tough. The second line with Ryan McLeod, Alex Tuch's been red hot, but I just don't feel like I want to get to there. They're 25 scoring chances, 4 per 60, under 10 scoring, high danger chances, 4 per 60. It just doesn't feel like a great spot here for that second line for the Sabres either. Third line, obviously not either. But so yeah, I think that Buffalo 1, I'll probably get there about 10%, but I don't think that the Sabres are in as good of a spot as maybe the public kind of seems to feel about them. I mean, the second line's still garnering about 6% ownership, and then the third line's way down there. But what are you planning on doing on the other side of this game?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I'm okay mixing in a little bit of this Buffalo 1 line. That's probably going to be it for me. I do agree with you, though. Like, I think that there's a little too much ownership coming on here on the Buffalo Sabres side of things. Obviously, Buffalo 1 going to see 48% of their ice time going up against that Connor McDavid line. The truth of the matter is that line is just so good at tilting the ice, especially with Evan Bouchard there on the blue line. And now you got Jake Wallman, another guy who's been a really strong play driver this year. In San Jose, Wallman looked great in his debut game at $2,500. Unfortunately, we're not getting him that cheap on this Monday slate here, but I think he's $4,900. That's still a fine price for him. I really honestly have a bit of a hard time seeing Buffalo 1 doing a whole lot out there, just given the way that the Oilers are able to tilt the ice here. So I guess, again, like you said, it really depends on what Stuart Skinner shows up here tonight for the Edmonton Oilers. In his 6 games against the Buffalo Sabres, he's got a 3 wins, 2.5 goals against average, and a .918 save percentage. So I think Stuart Skinner can have a fine game tonight. I don't know how much exposure I'm going to get to him in the crease tonight, to be totally honest with you. But I'm not huge on this Buffalo side of things. Again, I think, maybe coming in with like 5-10% for me is probably going to be it on Buffalo 1. And that'll probably be most of my Buffalo exposure, if not all of it, from the forward group.
Yeah, it's. I think the only reason I'm even considering them is the price is very attractive. Like Norris under 5K, Peterka 5,500. That's a line that's got enough talent to where they can certainly put the puck in the back of the net, and the Sabres will need that line to do a lot of the heavy lifting. The second line, Tuch's been red hot. Zucker's back. He's still in the top power play unit. But they're just so expensive. It just feels like, okay, whatever. Yeah, I'm obviously just going to pivot to this top line, which has got a little bit higher upside and is cheaper. So very easy to get to Buffalo 1, a lot more difficult to get to the depth. In terms of the power play for Buffalo tonight, it grades out 6 out of 8. 5th out of 8. They do draw a nice matchup against Oilers BK. That's been a little bit struggling as of late. And then you've got the Oilers taking plenty of penalties as well. Okay, let's get to game number 2. We've got the Ottawa Senators and the Detroit Red Wings. You've got the Senators at minus 163, 3.4 implied total, 2.6 implied total for the Detroit Red Wings. Matchups in this game, not going to be a lot of hard matching. So what I did for this game was took in what they did in their first game with Dylan Cousins in the lineup and used that matchup against the Rangers. They didn't do a whole lot. The one thing that's kind of worth pointing out is basically the The Stutzla line and the Pinto line shared duties in terms of going up against the top 6, and then that allowed Cousins to face the third line a lot more in his debut, and then the fourth line saw a lot of each other. So when you take a look at it, the Red Wings third line really does struggle defensively. It's much worse defensively than the top 6. So that does open things up decently here for that Dylan Cousins line, which is extremely cheap, extremely affordable. $4,100 for Braun, just $4,700 for Cousins, and Drake Batherson at $5,100. The bonus point here is that they moved Dylan Cousins up to the top power play unit for this game, replacing Claude Giroux on that unit. So obviously now he correlates nicely with Drake Batherson. And I think that they make for a really interesting stack tonight. This is a Detroit Red Wings team that is really not played very well coming out of the break. They have struggled mightily, and like Cam Talbot just has not been the same Cam Talbot we saw like earlier in the season. He was great. He was turning in strong performance after strong performance. And as of late, I would say he's cost them more games than he's earned them. So in his last 3 games, specifically 2 against Columbus and 1 against Washington, he's 0-3 with an .831 save percentage. So really nice spot here for the Senators. That's a team that's obviously playing fairly well right now. The offense, could probably get going a little bit, but they're fully healthy again. Adding Cousins, maybe rejuvenating this team for a nice playoff push at the deadline. I really like the second line as a value option. They've got a great matchup here, the best matchup in the top 9 here for the Senators. Obviously, the top line's firmly in play as well. They grade out just above Ottawa, too, for a lot more expensive price tags. Giroux, $4,600 is fine, but without PP1 exposure, I think obviously his upside comes down a little bit. And then honestly, even Tkachuk and Stutzla, I think, are pretty underpriced. $7,400 for the floor that you get from Tkachuk feels fine. Stutzla's been red hot at $6,200. I really like the Senators. I hope to God I'm wrong because I need the Red Wings to win this game. But from a DraftKings perspective, the Senators top 6 looks like it's an absolute dynamite spot tonight. And to be completely honest, I probably will get down to the third line a little bit too. The matchup is pretty good for them. They're super cheap, and you're going to need some super cheap options to mix in with Colorado and Edmonton tonight. So, yeah, I'm going to be pretty heavily exposed to the Senators tonight. I think the Red Wings are really struggling right now. I think the goaltending has been really poor, and there's not that much ownership coming in on the Sens. What do you think tonight?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to get to some of these Ottawa Senators here. Admittedly, I've been playing some Ottawa 1 here in the last week or two. Really haven't gotten there for me, especially around Tim Stutzla. If he's not putting up points, he's really not putting up anything in terms of DraftKings. Scoring 6.5 shots on goal per hour of ice time is really not a whole lot. His saving grace, 3.2 points per hour, 2.3 assists per hour, really helping set up a lot of Brady Tkachuk. So, I think for me with Ottawa 1, I'm a little more comfortable going the mini stack route, building around, Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stutzla, maybe mixing in a little bit of Claude Giroux there. I think the ownership numbers are fair on this Ottawa side of things. I mean, 10% for the top line, 9% for the second line, 6% for the third line. I'm going to be comfortable meeting the field on these numbers here. Might be a little overexposed to Brady Tkachuk, projecting for just 11% on his own. I think this is a pretty nice spot here overall for the Ottawa Senators. Similarly with that second line, I haven't seemed to have been able to get them right as of late, but, Dylan Cousins in his time with Buffalo, a lot of success against Detroit, 6 goals, 12 points in 15 games. Drake Batherson, obviously with his time in Ottawa, 5 goals, 13 points in 16 games as well. So, I think there's some reason to get to the Senators here tonight. I don't think I'm going to be going too crazy. Might get a little bit more than I think just because of, the way the salaries are breaking down and stuff like that. But I think that's where I'm going to be going with Ottawa. Detroit, I mean, you'll have a better handle on this than me, but it feels a little bit gross to get to the Red Wings. And I think for me, my builds around the Red Wings are probably just going to be through their power play.
Yeah, and speaking of the power play, when we were just going through those Edmonton power plays, everything looked off to me. So I just reran the numbers on the power plays, and they look significantly different than what I have on the thing. So let me just pop these into the charts here, and I'll update the main charts as well because they looked very off, and I didn't know what to make of them. They look a lot better now, to be sure, but they look very different. So that looks a little bit better than what it just didn't make any sense to me. And I was trying to figure out, why is the Oilers penalty kills like the worst when we just looked at the last 10 and the numbers weren't that bad. So, okay. The Oilers' power play is still on a great spot, but their power play has been much better, 7th best up against the 24th ranked PK. The problem is they still don't draw a lot of penalties. For the Senators and the Red Wings, both power plays have been really good still. Both penalty kills suck. So it's a good opportunity here for the Red Wings. The problem with the Red Wings is, and I agree wholeheartedly with you, you basically just have to stack around this power play. There's not a whole lot going on for them at 5v5. You take a look here. I mean, they're still generating a lot of looks. They've been kind of snake bitten coming out of the break. They're shooting just 5.8% as a team. So, like, I'm still willing to bet on the Red Wings. I do think that there's bounce back potential, but some nights they still look lifeless, which doesn't give me a ton of hope. But the power play has been unbelievable still. If they can find this 5v5 game a little bit, they'll be fine. But like they had a couple games against the Blue Jackets where they put up like 40 shots and just couldn't score. So, positive aggression will likely set in eventually. Linus Ullmark's been, fine. I don't think he's been amazing by any stretch. He's been, fairly shaky. So I do think the Red Wings are still in play tonight. I still hope this is a game in which the Red Wings can win. But since Ullmark returned to the crease in early February, he's an .891 save percentage in 8 games. He's had a couple big performances, but mostly given up 3 or 4 goals a night. So I do think the Red Wings are in play. It's a little bit harder to find a spot to play. And it's probably going to come mostly through power play stacks, as you mentioned. So, when you take a look at the big board here, not this one, Detroit 1 grades out 14th, Detroit 2 grades out 15th. They're not seeing much ownership at all. Soderblom, I'm expected to be on that top line still with Larkin and Raymond. Larkin and Raymond are super cheap at 6,100 and 5,300. So I'll get there because they're just way too cheap. DeBrink at $6,100. He's been playing well. Patrick Kane, $5,800. He's fine. I'll have exposure to both of these lines, just probably from bias, I think. But I do think that they're in an okay enough spot here. Like when you look at the team trends, the Senators have been decent defensively. The penalty kill, though, has been terrible. So I do think this is a spot in which the Red Wings power play gets going. And then anything you get at 5v5 is just gravy. So I'm going to trust this power play, still get back to them. But when you look at it from a 5v5, from a full line standpoint here, 14th and 15th, not great. So I'm going to limit my exposure, but I'm still having some exposure because I do think that they've got kind of slate breaking upside with how good that power play can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's easy to kind of build around this Detroit top 6 if you want to as well. Maybe not necessarily from a dollar standpoint or anything like that, but it's pretty easy to stack Dylan Larkin and Lucas Raymond with Moritz Seider, or Alex DeBrincat and Patrick Kane with Seider as well. So I think that's kind of the way that I'm going to be going there. You're getting correlation at 5-on-5. Seider plays pretty much all of his minutes with guys in that top 6 anyways. So I'm comfortable getting there in that sense. I think Elmer Soderblom is an interesting pun play at $2,600. I've been playing a little bit of him when he was on Detroit 3, 6.3 shots on goal per hour, 2.2 points per hour. Maybe finds a way to luck into a point here tonight as well. $2,600, kind of put him in that same category as Vasily Podkolzin.
Yeah, he's looked good too. There's a reason he got bumped up to that top line. He's looked solid. Their metrics as a line haven't been great, but such a small sample size. I'm not going to put a ton of stock into it, but they needed Kasper down the middle, so I think it makes sense. Kasper's great. I think he looked better on the wing with Larkin and Raymond than he does in the middle, but that line's obviously got plenty of upside. You've said it before. Whenever you play Detroit 1, Detroit 2 seems to go off, and Alex DeBrincat specifically has been playing extremely well, obviously kind of returning to Ottawa tonight. He's been a bit snake bitten coming out of the break here, but I mean, if you take a look back at his last 16 games, he has 10 goals and 16 points during that stretch. So DeBrincat's been playing very, very well. We'll see if he can stay hot tonight. Again, power plays both look very good in this game as well. Let's get to game number 3. The Avs are minus 510, which is insane. I do just want to go back actually to the Ottawa game because I don't think we fully got to how much I like Ottawa too. That price is just so cheap. And I do think like Dylan Cousins looked solid in that first game. I got really carried away with that power play thing, but like that Cousins, Sanderson, Batherson stack feels really good tonight. I feel pretty strongly about Ottawa too at that price point. And I'll certainly be getting there. Now, minus 510 for the Avs. Crazy. Somebody pointed out earlier, Chicago is less of a punching bag in the Spencer Knight era. And while that is true, Spencer Knight has been spectacular. To expect him to continue to go out there and make 40 saves a night is tough. I think the main concern about them being still a punching bag is that they gave up 42 and 39 shots on goal in both of those games. So he's going to face a ton of rubber. Now, he has been unbelievable. 951 save percentage in those two games. So, yeah, less of a punching bag, sure, still a punching bag nonetheless, though. The betting markets does not seem to believe much in Spencer Knight this evening against the Avs. It's the lowest event game of the night. Now, this is a really interesting one because I actually finished the charts before we got lines from Chicago, and oh my God, Colorado 1 looked like the greatest play in the history of DFS tonight. But then Chicago announced that Jason Dickinson is back, and he's actually going to play on the wing with Connor Bedard, which we've seen them do a couple times this year, and their defensive metrics are actually pretty good. So they went from having Chicago went from basically having the worst defensive metrics imaginable to fairly decent. Still a 77.4 matchup score for Colorado 1, so they still grade out as the number 1 line overall. Their numbers continue to be otherworldly, just absolutely insane. And honestly, NetChess has kind of come back down to earth a little bit, but he's $6,600. I'm willing to get back to him there. Lehkonen, $5,600 seems way too cheap. Unfortunately for him, he's bumped off that top power play unit, but you can easily just put Valeri Nichushkin in there at $5,400, who's way too cheap, coming off a hat trick. And on that top power play unit. Brock Nelson will also be on that top power play unit tonight. He's going to replace Jonathan Drouin on that top unit. So now you've got 2 members of the top line, 2 members of Colorado 2. And what I like the most about the Colorado Avalanche's trade deadline is it made them way more fun to target from a DFS standpoint. It was so hard to play Colorado 2 because Casey Middlestad was terrible. They generated very little offense, even with Nichushkin. Now you got Brock Nelson, who's way too expensive. Tell me DraftKings hasn't changed the pricing here. $7,200 Brock Nelson. Okay. But anyways, I digress. This is a really good, ruin the charts. This is a really good mini stack in my opinion. I love Nelson and Nichushkin as a pivot option tonight off of that Colorado 1 chalk. But Colorado 1, absolute smash spot too. This power play grades out with the number 4 ranked advantage tonight. The Blackhawks, the only thing they're kind of good at is staying out of the penalty box a little bit, but not really. Just their penalty kill's been solid. Getting Dickinson back tonight will help a little bit too. But Colorado's top 6, man. I mean, I don't know. There's just nothing you can say about this top line that would do them any justice how good they've been. But at least there's a pivot option now. So I will probably be under the field on Colorado 1 and just hope for the best, and over the field on Colorado 2 and hope that they can at least match the output of Colorado 1 here. So I thought Nelson and Nichushkin looked really solid in their first game together. Hopefully that continues. Obviously, Nichushkin scoring a hat trick helps. I think Nichushkin's obviously underpriced. I think Nelson's way too expensive, so it kind of balances out a little bit there. They should both probably be about $6,500. So really, really like that second line as well tonight. What says you?
Yeah, I'm going to play some Colorado tonight, I think. It seems like
that's
an okay
crazy
spot. This top line seems like they're pretty good. I guess the second line's okay as well here.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know. What do you say about this top line? You said it. It's just words can't really do justice. Just play them. Just play them. Eat the chalk, 20-25% your 20 max. Find a way to make it work because you kind of have to, right? I mean, again, we're seeing, heavy ownership on Nathan McKinnon, 36%, Mar.10, 23-24%, Arturi Lehkonen. I mention him all the time. I love playing this guy. He is coming in for 15% here tonight, continuing to just score goals left, right, and center. I don't mind the idea of getting down here to this second line as well. You mentioned Brock Nelson and his price is $7,200. That's up $1,000 from where he's been at. And even more with the Islanders. I mean, he was not too long ago, just $5,500. 7,200 is a little bit scary for me, but again, I think you made a great point that him and Nichushkin kind of balance each other out in that sense. So yeah, I'm going to be meeting the field on Colorado, probably a little bit overexposed on that second line. It feels like a bit of a smash spot. I mean, there's no other way to put it really. I also think it's in the realm of possibility that Spencer Knight continues to stand on his head here, makes 40 or 50 saves and Colorado can only score 3, maybe 4 goals. Is that going to be enough to take down the slate? Who knows? It really depends on where that offense comes from, right? But it does feel like you just kind of have to eat this chalk on this Colorado side of things and move on from there.
Yeah, Connor says, Knight 50 saves to cash the 5-1 money line tonight. It's possible. I don't think it's likely, but yeah, like I mean, I'm gonna have some Spencer Knight lineups tonight without question. Like I think in your Colorado fades, it makes sense. Like they're gonna be so chalky that if for whatever reason he stands on his head, um, even if they lose this game, Spencer Knight's probably going to be like the third or fourth highest scoring goalie on the slate because he's just going to face so much volume. So, even if they lose, even if he gives up 4 goals, he's still going to score like 20 points tonight, probably. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to have lots of exposure to Knight, but like outside of that, man, it's pretty gross. I'm probably going to play like 0 Chicago forwards tonight. The matchups are far from ideal for that top line. Maybe get a little bit of that second line into the mix. Donato and Mikheyev, and Teravainen. I mean, Mikheyev's on that line, but I'm not playing him. But Teravainen and Donato, the matchup's pretty good here. It's like not great, but they've been solid enough to at least consider. The problem is that they're fairly expensive, $4,800 each. It's not crazy. I'll get there. Donato's been one of the best players in the league since like coming out of the break. So, I with Wedgwood getting the start, I feel a little bit more comfortable about getting to this line than I did if Blackwood got the nod. But I'm not going to get too carried away here. Like again, maybe 5-10%, kind of similar to how they're being owned. I think that there's better spots to have leverage tonight. This is just a really, really difficult matchup. The Avs are a superb defensive hockey club. They've given up 2.13 expected goals against per 60 over the last 10. They've been awesome. And then Donato and Teravainen, not a great power play matchup either. Worst power play matchup on the slate. So, yeah, I'll get there a little bit, but I'll limit my exposure. I still think that they got a couple decent options on the back end for salary relief. Vlasic's been solid as well. So mix it a little bit of Chicago, but there's much better low owned and cheap plays on the slate, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing that's also kind of worth mentioning too, if you just pull up those last 10 charts again, like Colorado has been good as of late, like no doubt about it. But 2.62 goals per hour at 5-on-5 over their last 10. Like it's not like otherworldly numbers or anything like that. And again, when you look at it, like so much of that damage as of late for them has really come on the power play, right? So, is there a world where, Chicago is able to stay disciplined, stay out of the penalty box and just kind of try and, not lose too bad at 5-on-5? I think it's entirely possible. So, again, I don't really think that changes my opinion of playing Colorado. Like I said, I'm going to be comfortably getting to the field here, but I just thought that was kind of interesting to kind of see there.
Did you know? I mean, I'm sure you did, but they've played twice this year. Chicago's won both games. So, I mean, we've been in these spots on this show saying, yeah, I mean, obviously we're playing Colorado tonight. And it's not worked out. The one time, maybe both times, you talked about Peter Mrazek, and he ended up being a good play. I don't recall if he started both of them. I know he started the one. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Like, if they stay disciplined, sure. I think it's possible that this one stays relatively close. I'm not going to, I wouldn't put my name on it, but like, I do think that, we've seen it twice already this year. There's a world in which they struggle a bit. But the other thing to bring up is that in their last 5 games, they've scored 5, 5, 4, 7, and 7. So there's also that. Any interest on the Chicago side of things here? There's obviously Chicago 2 to the line that we've played a little bit. The blue line remains pretty affordable. I'm going to bring up the blue line here while you go through your little Chicago breakdown.
Yeah, I don't mind getting some of this Chicago 2 mini stack of Donato and Teravainen. You put me on them last week. They worked out well for me, so I'm comfortable getting back there. I don't love the pricing, but I'm 20 maxing tonight, so I'm sure I can find a way to get them 5-10% exposure. The defenseman is kind of what's really interesting to me. Wyatt Kaiser at $2,700 is looking like he could be a really solid play. I talked about this guy a lot earlier this season, and he's come back up on recall and just continuing to do what he was doing earlier this year. 4 shots on goal per hour, 5 blocks per hour of ice time. If this game is tilting the way that we all kind of are expecting it to, I think there's a lot of equity in some of these defensemen. Kaiser looks like a good play. Vlasic, Connor Murphy, I can get behind pretty much any of these defensemen. Like there's a world where they all work well as value guys blocking shots.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Wyatt Kaiser, $2,700. You don't need much out of him to to hit value there. So don't mind him and Vlasic specifically this evening. Okay, let's get to the final game of the night, which is seeing plenty of ownership. It's the Utah Hockey Club and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Both have 3.1 implied totals, basically a toss-up here. Matchup-wise, it's very interesting in this game. It's going to be a lot of Utah 2, the Barrett Hayton line up against the Matthews line. It's going to be a lot of Utah 1 up against the Tavares line. So better matchup for Utah 2, but not like it's not a line that struggles defensively for whatever reason. The Matthews line still giving up 3.2 actual goals against, despite being pretty good defensively. So, we talked about a couple spots already tonight that are lower owned than we would like, and I like Utah tonight. Joseph Wall has not played very well, but I also think that Utah 1 is seeing maybe more ownership than they probably deserve. I think that for a couple of reasons, they're just underpriced maybe. And that's just the reason that people are going there, because the matchup doesn't seem all that great. But Hayton, I mean, he's had 7 shots last game. He's had some really good numbers with Dylan Gunther, and he's only $4,200. So I get it. Gunther at 6,200, probably too cheap. Then you've got Cooley and Schmaltz, both under 5K, both definitely too cheap. So I don't love the matchup, but I feel like I almost get there out of necessity just to save some salary. But I mean, when you take a look at the big board here, this is still a Toronto Maple Leafs team that, hasn't been necessarily great defensively over the last 10, but they did a lot of work to shore that up at the deadline, bringing in Brandon Carlo, bringing in Scott Lawton. They're going to be more difficult to play against at 5v5. The same boat. This is also not a Utah team that's necessarily scoring a ton, just 2.42 goals for per 60 at 5v5. I mean, they're 0.54 goals scored below expected during that time. So there is the chance that, that this goes up. But this feels like a pretty low scoring game, right? Utah's been really good defensively. I don't necessarily think I'm going to be overexposed to this game, especially with as much ownership as coming in on the Utah side. The Toronto side, fairly low owned. You're going to have some new lines tonight after this trade deadline acquisitions. You're going to see Bobby McMahon move back up to the second line with Tavares and Nylander, which makes that line much more attractive from a DFS standpoint. We know how good that top line is. That McMahon with Tavares and Nylander, I mean, their offensive metrics come up a ton with McMahon instead of Holmberg. Shocker. The top line obviously gets you, but I just don't think I'm going to be crazy exposed to this game. It does feel a little bit lower scoring. I'm going to have exposure without question, but do you agree that Utah maybe isn't quite as good of a play as maybe as the ownership suggests, or is it just a pricing thing? Because they still grade out 4th and 6th best, and they're 15,000 and 13,200, both of them.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure where I come out on this game yet. I was trying to build around some of this Utah side of things. I did manage to do so, for our head-to-head lineup here. I like both of these top lines. I think I like the second line a little bit more. You mentioned Barrett Hayton, 10 shots on goal per hour over his last 20 games. Dylan Gunther, since he's returned from injury, he's been absolutely tremendous, right? 2 goals per hour of ice time, 13.2 shots on goal per hour. I think I like getting to this second line a little bit more than this top line. Alex Kerfoot, another one of these, low 2K guys that you can probably mix in there if you have to. One interesting thing about Kerfoot, obviously a former Toronto Maple Leaf, 7 games played against the Leafs in his career, 3 goals and 6 points. Maybe he finds a way to get on the board here tonight, and that would be a huge thing if you are building around that Utah 2 line. I think I'm okay to get there a little bit on this top line. I'll probably be under the field on them, though. Clayton Keller has been the big driver here as of late for them. 4.4 points per hour over his last 20 games, 9.6 shots. Cooley and Schmaltz, both respectable shot volume, around 7 per hour, but neither of them have really been scoring a ton. They've been scoring a lot more than they really should be. For Logan Cooley, 1.2 goals per hour versus 0.6 expected, and Schmaltz 1 goal per hour versus 0.8. So I'm okay getting there. I think I can get to 10% of each of these top 2 lines. But I think I like that second line a little bit more than I like that top line. The Toronto side of things I think is pretty interesting. It feels like John Tavares' price has come down here a little bit, down to $5,500. William Nylander, 6,800, I think is a fine play too. Solid shot volume from him. I'm kind of excited about Bobby McMahon coming back up onto the second line. I mean, he was tremendous up there earlier on this season before, they bumped him down to the third line. He was shooting lots. He had a ton of volume. He was scoring a lot of goals. I really have no issue getting here on this second line as well for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I feel like probably should be a little bit more expensive. They are. I mean, $1,600 to full stack these guys. That feels like a pretty nice number right there. So, and then obviously Toronto won. They're still Toronto won. Austin Matthews is still an absolute dog at $8,400. He's probably a fine play tonight as well.
Yeah, these two teams met earlier in the season. It was 3-2 for the Leafs. Just feels very much like what we're going to get tonight. And I don't know if anybody in this game really breaks this slate wide open, but yeah, like it does kind of feel like it's similar. Like the field is we're not very chalky on the show. At least I don't feel like we are. And tonight I feel like we're mostly in line with ownership, and where it's like there doesn't seem to be any really home run plays outside of Colorado 1. I think Edmonton 1 can certainly be that. So like that's why I was saying earlier, like I think I'm going to end up higher on Edmonton 1 than I am kind of some of these other lines that are all coming in at about 10%. So I think my leverage will end up being on Edmonton and then be a little bit under the field on some of these other games, specifically Toronto and Utah. I think like everybody getting to 10% of them, it's like, maybe I mix in about 10%, but I'll probably come in a little bit lower, at least, 10% of each. Like there's just no way. I don't think I'm going to get there on all 4 of these lines here. So kind of interesting. This third line's been kind of solid in terms of value as of late as well. I just want to throw them out here again. I don't love this game by any stretch, but their underlying metrics are really quite strong. And if you're looking for some cheap options, up front, Lawson Krause on that top power play unit on that second power play unit has been solid. Josh Doan, just $4,900. They haven't been overly productive or anything, but the underlying metrics do stand out a little bit at 10,700. So if you're looking for a super cheap line, that they would be my shout there. Yeah, this game is interesting. I don't know. It just seems very bizarre. But I will say that I'll probably have more Toronto 2 than Toronto 1, just given that price tag. Like, what's going on with Tavares at $5,500 and McMahon? Like, $16,000 for this full line feels way better than nearly $20,000 for the top line.
Yeah, I agree with you. Pretty much worth mentioning here that they haven't changed the pricing from DraftKings, and I think that's why John Tavares has gone from being $7K to $6,800 to $6K, and now down to $5,500. I don't know, man. It doesn't make any sense to me why his price has dropped, $1,500, because he's had a couple of very productive games, in those last few. 21.5 DraftKings points against Colorado, 6.5 against Vegas. Obviously not a great game there. 15 against the San Jose Sharks, 20 against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Obviously these teams aren't world burners in terms of, the Sharks and the Penguins, but like, I just don't get it. So if they're going to make him down at $5,500, I'll happily get over the field here on without any issue.
Shout out to a couple guys in the chat here pointing out that Mark Masters did say 13 minutes ago. So while we were live here, it's actually going to be Calle Jarnkrok that starts with Tavares and Nylander tonight. So while we were live, that just came out. Turns out McMahon is not starting with Tavares and Nylander. We actually switched it up again this morning. Bobby said with a smile, we're throwing you guys for a loop. So happened while we were live. Thanks for that. So it'll be Calle Jarnkrok on line 2 and Bobby McMahon moving down to, I'm assuming, line 3, and then Pontus Holmberg down to line 4, I would imagine will be the case. But yeah, that sucks. But thanks for pointing that out. At least it didn't happen like 8 hours ago. It happened 13 minutes ago while we were chatting about this. So, okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the power plays of this game, and then we'll move on to the defensemen and the goalies. Both power plays been really solid. Both penalty kills kind of stinky as of late. Decent matchups here across the board. The Toronto power play is what the Toronto power play has been. 5 forwards continuing to be on that top unit. And then for the Utah top power play unit, it's going to be a mix of the top line and the second line. Obviously, you've got Hayton and Gunther up there from the second line. You've got Schmaltz and Keller there from the top line, and the Sergachev quarterbacking that unit. So, Zach, any final thoughts on this game now that you know that we just talked about how awesome Bobby McMahon is for 12 minutes, and he is skating with Scott Laughton and Max Domi?
Don't really have much interest in playing Bobby McMahon anymore.
Figured as much. That's awesome. Thanks for at least, Scott or Mark Masters, at least he tweeted out while we were live. It's been very difficult to get information today too, just with X being a shitstorm. So, okay, let's get to some defensemen and some goalies, and we'll head on our way. So, projections really like the expensive defensemen tonight, which I guess maybe that this not new DraftKings pricing is locking it in a little bit, because they're the projections are all the expensive guys, which I guess makes sense. So Makar, $7,800 feels way too cheap. I think we should start there. Thoughts on Makar at $7,800?
Yeah, getting the Leon Draisaitl treatment here, going down to the high 7K range for whatever reason.
Because the price
looks like a great play, man. I mean, look, he had, what was it, 6 points against the San Jose Sharks a couple of nights ago. So you could expect a huge game from him as well at $7,800. Pretty reasonable price tag there, all things considering, for what Makar is able to do out there on the ice. So I think he looks like a tremendous play. Darnell Nurse, looks like he's another guy who's a really solid play. I'm going to see a ton of ice time projected here tonight. Shoots a lot, blocks a lot. He's up in the rush, plays a lot with that Leon Draisaitl line. Jake Wallman, Evan Bouchard, they're probably good plays as well here tonight. I actually think there's a lot of sub 3K value here on this slate tonight. I mean, you take a look at some of these names that are popping value-wise. Ian Cole at $2,600. Brandon Carlo at $2,700 looks like an excellent play. Michael Kesselring, he plays a lot with that top six as well in Utah. So if you're building around them, he's an easy, cheap guy to get to. John Marino at $2,600, probably a good play too. And then the aforementioned Wyatt Kaiser, who I love here tonight at $2,700. Some interesting options here on the blue line if you really want to go stars and scrubs kind of route tonight.
I was just trying to look up some Cale Makar numbers. Since basically the middle of January, he is tied for 8th in the NHL in points with 25 points in his last 18 games. He also has 11 goals during that time, which is tied for 10th in the league. So he's insane. A couple other guys that are on tonight's slate that have been amazing since that stretch. Nathan McKinnon's 5th in the league. Clayton Keller's 6th in the league. Donato is 11th in the league, 24 points in his last 19 games. And you got Matthews at 14th, Stützle at 15th for tonight's. It's just, I could not believe. I mean, I knew Makar's been good, but man, he's just not even, he's a cheat code. But $7,800 way too cheap. Yeah, Darnell Nurse sticks out. He's been much better. Seen a lot more minutes too. Projected for 30 minutes tonight with the new blue line that they've got there with no Klingberg and no Ekholm. Still love Jake Sanderson. I'm going back to Jake Sanderson again tonight as well. But yeah, the Utah guys look like good plays. The Kesselrings, the Coles, even the John Marinos. I'm on board with you there. We already talked about the Chicago defensemen being solid values as well. Yeah, a lot of options tonight, but I still think there is good options on the blue line, like cheap options, but I really like just some of these top end options tonight. Like Makar is just too cheap. Jake Sanderson is just too cheap. I'm going to probably end up getting to a lot of those two guys this evening. And Jake Wallman, I mean, I wish he was still $2,500. That was so much fun, but he looked really good in his first game with the Oilers. Great pass, big hits. You got the full Jake Wallman experience in one game. So I'm still just heartbroken that we gave him away for free and he's now an Edmonton Oiler, but it is what it is. Let's get to the goalies tonight. Scott Wedgwood's the most expensive goalie in the slate. Cam Talbot projected for the most ownership at $7,400. I talked about how bad he's been. So I'm definitely going to be in on Ottawa tonight and trying to bust some of that Cam Talbot chalk because I don't think he's that great of a play. He's just been pretty bad. I would prefer Karel Vamilka, who's $100 more expensive. I think, again, that's going to be a lower scoring game. He's been absolutely dynamite as of late. He is Utah's guy, and he's going to be I think he's a good play at $7,500. I would rather play Spencer Knight at $7K than Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen at $7,200. I think Knight just got a little bit more shot volume equity, and if he makes 40 saves, even if they lose, he's fine. But probably going to pay up for a lot of Scott Wedgwood tonight. I think that he is the safest option. Obviously, 83.6 applied win percentage. The rest of these guys all feel fairly sketchy. Like Linus Ullmark, I talked about his struggles. Joseph Woll has been basically terrible as of late. So he feels risky. Even if that's a lower scoring game, I don't feel all that comfortable with Joseph Woll. I just don't think he's played that well. I'm trying to pull up his numbers here. I mean, he got just absolutely shelled in Vegas. That's never going to help. But since January 25th, his last 8 starts, 897 save percentage. At that price point, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, it does feel pretty gross here in terms of the goaltenders here tonight. I kind of like Karel Vamilka at $7,500. Obviously, fresh off that extension, he's been great this year. Not a lot of win equity, which is a bit of an issue, but 910 save percentage, 21.7 goals saved above expected. I don't mind going that route. beyond that, man, I kind of agree with you. Like, it feels pretty gross. Like Scott Wedgwood, I'm fine getting there. $8,400 is a bit expensive for me. I kind of agree on Cam Talbot. I'm not a huge fan of that at 18%.
Just too
Stuart
chalky.
Skinner, I suppose he's a fine play tonight. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, I don't think I'll be getting there at all. 2 games played against the Edmonton Oilers, a 4.82 goals against average. So pretty rough sledding for him.
Yeah, I think it's going to be mostly Wedgwood on my pay ups and Vimilka on my pay down spots. Maybe mixing a little bit of Allmark and Skinner. That's probably the extent of it. As Jim B said, they all feel a little bit gross. How long does Zetterlund stay on Ottawa for? Who knows? Probably just easing him in. Don't think it'll be long before he replaces like Michael Amadio at the very least on that third line, but we shall see. I don't imagine he's going to move up much tonight. Probably won't play a ton, but he is on PB2. Let's get today's hat trick pick challenge. If you want to participate in today's hat trick pick challenge, all you got to do is drop your hat trick pick in the live, not the live chat, the comment section of the video, not the live chat. And if your player scores a hat trick, we'll get you a $25 gift card to Nation Gear. If somebody scores a hat trick that nobody picks, we will just randomly give it away to somebody who or raffle it off, I guess, to somebody who did comment a hat trick pick. So get in for free, can maybe get $25 to pick up some DFO gear. Let's get to our hat trick picks first, Zach, before we get to our DFO head-to-head. I won our last head-to-head, so I will go first. I'm going to go back-to-back hat tricks for Valeri Nichushkin.
Spicy, I like it. Let's go with Zach Hyman, $6,300. Looks like a nice play. He was almost there for against Dallas on the weekend. Let's see if we can get it done tonight.
Let's get to our head-to-head lineup challenge. As I mentioned, I won our last one, which tied us up at 35-35. I went with Nathan McKinnon, Arturi Lehkonen mini, but then I also got Nichushkin in the mix there at $5,400. Just such a beautiful, beautiful price tag. And then I went with Leon Draisaitl, one-off, Barrett Hayton, one-off kind of, with Cole and Marino as punt options on the blue line, Karel Vejmelka between the pipes. Kind of a gross lineup, not going to lie, but it's definitely going to be enough to get me to 36 and 35 on the season.
Yeah, and I'm going to be going to 35 and 36 on the season with whatever the hell I did with my lineup. I spent like half an hour trying to craft one, and this is the best that I came up with, which is kind of embarrassing. Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, go for some power play exposure. They still play a bunch together at 5-on-5, so no issue stacking them up together. Mar.10, Valeri Nichushkin, and Ross Colton, one guy from each of the top 3 lines for Colorado. You get a little correlation with Netchas and Nichushkin on the man advantage as well. Mentioned Brandon Carlo, looks like a great play at $2,700. Michael Kesselring, $2,600. Get some correlation between him and Barrett Hayton. And similarly to you, got the veggies in the crease tonight.
Yeah, so when Vejmelka gives up 11, won't matter. I hope that's not the case, because I'll have plenty of exposure to him. That's going to do it for this edition of the DFO DFS Report. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please smash that like button if you're watching on YouTube, which is the only place you can watch it right now because X didn't play our video today. So smash that like button for us. Really helps us grow this channel. Really helps us continue to bring you all this for free. And shout out to our friends at rotogrinders.com for providing projected ownership for tonight's show. If you want to get $20 off your first month of RotoGrinders Premium, you can do so by clicking the link in the description of the video on YouTube. And also in the description is the link to our DFO DFS Discord. If you want to join the community on Discord, you can join via link there. Best of luck to everybody tonight. Zach, before we go, I did miss a question earlier from our friend Peter Porker. Rank your top 3 lines based on price, but also value. I'm not really sure what that means, but my top 3 lines with price being a factor. I mentioned I really like Ottawa 2. These are kind of without order, but I really like Ottawa 2. I also really like Colorado 1 and Colorado 2. And I like Edmonton 1 a lot. So those would be like my 4 favorites overall. But like Ottawa 2 is probably my favorite value line on the slate, followed by Utah 2.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I think for me, Edmonton 1, Colorado 2, and Utah 2 is the way that I would be leaning.
Best of luck. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Hopefully you return with more money in your bankroll tomorrow than you had tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, cheers.
Cheers.